Welcome back to another episode of the Washington Nationals March to October. And guys, we did it. We did it again. We've made the postseason for a third straight year of this March to October. For a while there, it looked dicey. It looked like it might not happen. We went through the first, over 100 games. Still having a losing record, not even up at 500. But something changed, some switch was flipped, and we got not only enough to turn things around, get up over 500, but we got enough to have another 90-win season and win our first division title. It's actually really weird that this was our worst season in terms of our record. I don't remember exactly what our other records were, but they were pretty much the same the first two seasons, like maybe 95 wins the first season and then 96 the second, something like that. So this is our worst season, but it's the first season that we won the division. But before we get into the postseason, if you guys are regulars to this series, you know what we gotta do next. It's time for the regular season stat recap. It's the episode of the series that way less people watch and just about nobody's interested in but me, but I love looking through the stats. I love taking a deep dive. I'll try and keep it to a reasonable time. I always say this and I always fail, but we're just going to look around at the league in terms of the standings, see where everyone finished, and then we're going to take a look at our players' stats here at the end of the regular season before the playoffs start. So let's get into the division standings first, and we'll start with our division, and obviously kind of a weak division, which is weird because through the first two seasons of this March to October, we had a pretty strong division. Like I was saying, we won 95 games our first two seasons, and that wasn't good enough to win the division. So for this to turn around like this and for the division as a whole to be kind of weak, I mean, we still had four teams over 500, but these three were barely over 500. And I'm just now noticing for the first time that we are up to the first ranked team in terms of talent. We overtook, I think it was the Astros. It must be something to do with postseason rosters, which is weird. We'll get into it, but some of the decisions the CPU made I don't really like, but that's not a surprise anymore. We're used to March to October. But the Braves still made the postseason, and they're actually our first opponents. They snuck in the wild card, beat out the Phillies. They must have had some sort of tiebreaker over them. But now let's see what the rest of the league did. Let's go to the NL Central first, and the Cardinals won that division with a worse record than me. 88-74 got them the division title. The Cubs finished second, making the wild card. So yeah, another overall weak division here. And then if we go over to the West, the Dodgers won that one with 96 wins, but there was no 100 win team in the National League this season. And we, even though I consider it an underwhelming record at 90 wins, finished with the third best record in the league. And because the Padres are a wild card team, that means we got the second seed, which is why we got a first round bye, which is pretty awesome. So then we already saw, but taking a look at the wild card, there was one wild card team for each division. And yeah, as a whole, I feel like the entire National League was just kind of average until you get all the way down to the Diamondbacks with 108 losses. Now over to the American League, the Yankees won the East, 96-66 record. I think that matched the Dodgers. The Jays and Orioles both made wild card spots. Over to the Central, that's what it looks like in the AL Central still 3 years into this little world we've built. 85-77 wins the division, and the rest of the division all had losing records, even though Cleveland was the 8th ranked team, so they should have probably done better than they did. And then in the West, it was the Astros and Rangers tying with 97 wins. Those are the two best records in the league. Nobody got to 100 wins. Nobody got over 97. But man, what a division this was, because you have the two best records in the entire MLB in the same division. But then on top of that, you still have the Mariners and Angels, who had pretty solid winning records. So yeah, I think looking at it as a whole, the AL was probably a stronger league than the NL. Not just because of the records, but if you look at the team rankings, I feel like there's a lot of higher ranked teams in general in this league versus our league, where we're first, the Braves are 6th, and then it just kind of is like that. Well, then the Dodgers are 4th, and everybody else is double digits. So yeah, 7 of the top 10 teams are from the AL in terms of the overall rank. So now we can move over to our individual player stats, but I guess first, before we do that, we get to see our postseason roster, and it's a weird one. So as we know, as you hopefully know if you watched my March to Octobers, you don't get to do anything about this. It's all on the CPU. Whatever the CPU wants, the CPU gets. And the CPU, for some reason, wanted an extra position player for our postseason run. Pretty much the opposite of what anybody would want for a postseason run, is to have an extra position player and lose a pitcher. But we have 5 players on the bench for this postseason run. But then let's just look at our pitching, because the weird moves get even weirder here. Not just do we have one less pitcher, but the CPU decided to call up Michael Fulmer. He was one of those random offseason signings that I didn't even want to sign. He spent not even one game in the MLB this season, but the game decided, no, let's send down 76 overall Adam Simber and bring up Michael Fulmer. And then the pitcher that we're also missing to free up that roster spot to get an extra hitter is Matt Moore. So we're going into the playoffs with one less lefty and a worse option as a righty versus like Adam Simber. The other thing that sucks is the way the CPU ordered the pitching rotation. They put Mackenzie Gore over Josiah Gray, and usually that 5th starter spot never gets used in the playoffs. And I'll change it now, but I guarantee that it's going to get automatically changed back, because just the way that March to October works in the playoffs is after every game, they reorder the rotation on this screen, so the top guy is always the one pitching. But because the CPU reorders it for that reason, it also reorders it back to how it had it. So it's just going to come back and put Mackenzie Gore in this 4 spot. But all right, let's start with looking at the stats, and I'm on the pitching already, so we'll just start here this time. As a whole, throughout the regular season, the pitching in general, and definitely the starting pitching, was the weakest part of this team. Came around a bit at the end, so as a whole, they're not going to look as bad as they did for most of the season. But let's start with our highest rated arm, up to an 87 overall, Cade Cavalli. And the biggest thing you notice first is he got up to an A potential during this season, so we don't know exactly what that means. It could just mean a 90 potential, but still, that means he's going to top out higher than he would have topped out before, so that's a big change. He also had some good progression throughout the year. I don't remember what overall he started at, but finishing at an 87, not bad. And like I said, he kind of, like most people, brought those numbers back to a manageable level by the end of the season. So from here, it's not going to look like he did that bad. And man, how could I forget? He finished the regular season by throwing a perfect game. So if there's anybody on fire and ready for a postseason run, I guess it's Cade Cavalli. But he finishes 14-11, got over 200 innings pitched, didn't quite give up a hit per inning. The home runs allowed was pretty much the same as the year before. Strikeout numbers were down and walk numbers were way up, so that's not really what you want to see. And pretty much because of that, well, because all 3 of these were worse than the year before. Lower Ks per 9, higher walks per 9, slightly higher home runs per 9. That leads to a higher FIP, which leads to a higher or a lower wins above replacement. So by that metric, he had a full win worse of a season than the year before. Then moving over to Yohan Adon, the reigning NL Cy Young Award winner, and I don't think he's going to win that again this year. But he also had pretty good progression in terms of the attributes. That Ks per 9 up to 85 is looking pretty good. And then these were the numbers he put up. Still a winning record at 13-10 through over 200 innings. The hits were a little bit more this year. The home runs became more of an issue, giving up 34 in less innings. So he gave up 14 more home runs in like 13 less innings. That's not what you want. He also gave up more walks. Strikeout numbers were probably about the same on a rate basis, but you know, everything else was worse, so that's not good. 5.18 ERA is not as bad as the over 6 that he was carrying for pretty much the entire season until he turned it around a bit at the end. But hey, if he can put together a good playoff run, this won't even matter. Then over to Blake Snell, our big trade from last season. We got him locked up for a couple more after this one, and he actually progressed a little bit at age 32. I wasn't expecting that. I thought he was just going to kind of stay at an 84, but he got a little bit of an upgrade up to an 85, and he also was somebody who had worse numbers throughout the majority of the year, but then they came back right at the end. end. But actually, kind of weirdly enough, his hits allowed, I mean, I guess it is in like 4 less innings, but he gave up slightly fewer hits, fewer home runs, fewer walks. He actually had a better whip, but that led to him giving up 9 more earned runs. So that ERA is looking worse than the season before. He still managed 4 shutouts, though, which is crazy. 2.8 wins above replacement is actually better than last year. Okay, I didn't realize that. He must have really brought it back around at the end of the year. Because for the majority of the year, he was also somebody up over like 5.5 ERA. But this ended up as a pretty solid season. If I thought his last year was solid, then I guess I have to think this year's solid. Because it was. And then Josiah Gray. He was our ace in the first season, lost that title last year to Adone, who probably lost that title to Cavalli, but Josiah Gray, for the most part this season, was one of our more reliable arms. He didn't finish with amazing numbers, but still turned in a pretty solid year if it wasn't for 41 home runs allowed, which really, if we look at his attributes, he's always had that low home runs per 9. So the fact that he was able to manage that through the first 2 years was probably just lucky, and this year it all came back to bite him. He gave up 41 home runs, a little bit more hits than normal. Compared to last season, the strikeouts came back a bit, but not nearly as good as season 1. His walk numbers are looking good, but if 20 to 30-ish less walks leads to 20 more home runs, I'd rather him walk more people. And then the final starting spot, Mackenzie Gore. Another solid year of progression for him. He's still progressing at the same rate as Josiah Gray, and he's got that A potential. So at some point, you'd think he's got to start pitching like it, but he still hasn't. He was off to an especially bad start to this season. Like, I'm talking, I don't even remember how bad it was. He had like a 16 ERA or something like that through the first 4 starts. Only pitched 13 innings in the first 4 starts. So I guess when you think about how bad he started to finish the season under a 6 ERA, he had to have done something right for the rest of it. But it's just frustrating that he can't figure it out, and I don't know what it is. At least last year, if you watch my White Sox March to October, Kopech kind of had the same issue, but you could pinpoint why it was, and it was because Kopech had low stamina, but they were still leaving him in games. So he was giving up all of his runs late in games when he was out of energy, but Gore doesn't have low stamina, so I really don't know what his problem is. So I don't know. I don't know what I want to do with him. I don't know if I want to try and trade him starting next season. I mean, he should have 2 more years of team control after this one, not just the 1. But yeah, I don't know if I want to start looking to trade him because we do have people coming up through the system. I don't know if I want to just move him to a bullpen arm. He hasn't really been that much better when he's been coming out of the bullpen. But then speaking of the bullpen, let's go over there next. Jordan Hicks spent pretty much the whole season as a long reliever. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I think for the first chunk of the season, he wasn't a long reliever because we did have Strasburg. He progressed a little bit more over the course of the season with that B potential, but his numbers took a major dip. This kind of reminds me, and we'll talk about him later, this kind of reminds me of when we traded for Nick Sandlin in that first year, and then Sandlin's second year, he kind of fell off a cliff because Jordan Hicks was really good last year. 85 innings, over 100 strikeouts. The walks weren't that big of a deal, but this year, something changed. He gave up way more hits, way more walks. The strikeouts just went completely away. Gave up a decent amount more home runs, and when you're not striking out as many people and you walk more and give up more home runs, that's what leads to the negative WAR, and he had a negative WAR. I still trust him. Like, me bringing him into a game, I feel like I trust him, but I don't like the season that he had. And then we go to Caleb Ferguson. He was our off-season signing to bring in a lefty, and he progressed a little bit. I was hoping for a little bit more, actually, being a B potential and only 28, but you never know. His potential rating might top out at 80, but that home runs per 9 went up 7, so that's good. And he turned in a pretty good year for us, almost 50 innings pitched, not a low amount of hits allowed, and not a low amount of walks allowed, and not a high amount of strikeouts, but he managed to keep that ERA down to 2.54, so I will take that. It's not going to give him the best look when it comes to FIP and wins above replacement, but if he gets the job done, he gets the job done. And speaking of getting the job done, here's the first of my two favorite arms in our bullpen, Scott Efros. He lost the closer role after I brought in Sir Anthony Dominguez, and that was actually probably good for him, because last year he was the closer. Not like he had a bad season or anything, but compared to this season, it's nowhere near as good. Only got 31 and a third innings of work, but in those 31 innings, he only gave up 3 runs, only 7 walks, only 18 hits for an ERA of .86. So, I mean, I guess the FIP says he should have given up a few more runs, but whenever I pitched with him, it pretty much felt like he was unhittable. And then I don't have anything to say about Michael Fulmer, so we'll skip him for now and then go to Nick Sandlin, who I kind of touched on before, and he had another kind of underwhelming season for me. Decent progression, though, up to an 83, but if we look at his numbers, I mean, he had a lot of decisions, actually. I didn't realize that. 7-6 was his record. In 62 and a third innings, he got the heaviest workload he's had. But yeah, man, just compare it to his first season after we traded for him, it's just nowhere near as good, because he has that super high hits per 9. So you'd think, like, a year like this, giving up only 27 hits in 45 innings, you'd think that'd be kind of what he does. But he gave up plenty of hits this year, the walks are still high, and he gave up 8 homers, despite having a 93 home run per 9 rating. So things got even worse for him this year than they were last year, and I was already upset with how he pitched last year. So he's kind of another guy, right there with Mackenzie Gore, that I don't really know what I want to do with him. He should still have 2 years of team control, but same thing with Gore. We have other arms coming up through this system that if we can find a trade or something for Sandlin and get something good out of it, we could probably bring people up and not really miss out on anything if this is what Sandlin's going to do for us. And now, this is probably the undisputed favorite pitcher of mine in our bullpen, Joe Mantiply. We traded for him around the same time we traded for Nick Sandlin, but instead of regressing like Sandlin, he's just kept getting better. This year he gave us 35 2/3 innings of work in only 25 appearances. I probably accounted for half of those. I don't know why, but it seems like the CPU doesn't like to use him as much as I would like them to. But he only gave up 20 hits, 3 earned runs, 1 homer, only 4 walks, struck out 33 for a 76 ERA, .76 with a .67 whip. Just unbelievable year for him. He just righty, lefty, it doesn't matter who he faces. I just feel like he is in control. And then the final arm in the bullpen, Sir Anthony Dominguez, our closer, signed him in the offseason. He did progress a little bit at a B potential, and he had an okay season. I mean, I like using him. He was always good for me when I brought him in, but these numbers aren't like super shut down, you know, guarantee a win if you're winning and bringing him in. He's not that kind of arm. But he got us 38 saves, blew 6. Not a whole lot of hits allowed. Not a whole lot of walks. Decent amount of strikeouts. I mean, I don't know what else to say about him. He was solid. Not quite as good as I wanted him to be when I signed him, but solid. Now we can move over to the offense, and we'll just go right down the batting order here, starting with Ian Happ leading off, and you could make the case that he was our team MVP this year. I mean, first of all, the progression at 30 years old is crazy. Up to an 86 this year, got his contact versus lefties up to a 99, and look at these numbers, man. As a leadoff hitter, the first thing you see is that 400 on base, which is all you really want out of him. But then you look at the rest of what he did. He almost got 200 hits, almost 50 doubles, 5 triples, and 27 home runs. Almost drove in 100 runs as the leadoff hitter. 931 OPS. He was good in the field, and that gives him a 7.1 wins above replacement on the season. Then it's Luis Garcia, Mr. Clutch in the 2-hole. He got up to a 79 by the end of the year, but I'm kind of noticing he's trending downwards from that first season. Like every year he's getting slightly worse, and this was really the first time I felt it near the end of this season. I was kind of having trouble doing anything with him. I don't know what it was. I don't know what happened. I don't think you can say this is a bad season, just not quite as good as I'm looking for out of Luis Garcia. And I hate to even entertain the possibility, but we have like Brady House coming up through the system. We already have kind of a crowded middle infield with Ahmed Amed, Rosario, CJ Abrams, Isan Diaz even. So going into next season, it'll kind of be just figuring out who's the weakest among those, and that might be who gets the bench and maybe even who gets moved. But yeah, the OPS was way down for him, like almost 100 points below what he normally gives us. He had more errors. The WAR was still good, or solid at least, at a 2 even. But yeah, I just don't like seeing him trend downwards. We need a big postseason from him. And then it's our big signing of the offseason, the return of Juan Soto to the Nationals, and he did not disappoint. This is the season he gave us. He played in all but 4 games, gave us over 30 homers, over 100 RBI, over 100 walks, only 82 strikeouts, a 403 on base, 907 OPS, 4.9 wins above replacement. So it is kind of crazy to think like that. This was a really good year out of Soto, but in terms of wins above replacement, he was nowhere near as good as Ian Happ was. And then it's Joey Meneses, our mainstay, the 2-time reigning MVP winner. And he took another just slight step back, kind of like he did in season 1. He took a slight step back into season 2, but that was still good enough to win him the MVP. He took another just very slight step back this season, and I just feel like that's gotta be just enough to get him out of the MVP picture. But he played in every single game. He was back to being our all-time DH. Gave us 34 doubles, 34 bombs, 121 runs batted in, 929 OPS on him. Good enough for a 4.8 wins above replacement. So him and Soto batting back to back are just dangerous. And then you add Tristan Casas to that lineup, like we traded for him in the middle of the season, and it's starting to look like a really good trade the more and more we have him. Because first of all, look at the progression at an A potential, only 25 years old. He gets plus 11 to that contact against righties, and then everything else goes up, +4, +3, all except for the power versus lefties. But look at the numbers he gave us, man. 147 hits in only 122 games, over 20 bombs, over 20 doubles, doesn't strike out a ton. The on base is right there around 400, 926 OPS. I mean, these numbers fit right in with Soto and Meneses. He does not really miss a beat compared to those guys. Then we move to Keibert Ruiz, who for the first time didn't hit over 300 for us by the end of the season. And not only did the average come down a bit, but the home runs also came down a bit, down from 19 to 10. He did hit 10 more doubles and somehow got 5 triples. But yeah, not quite as good of a year as we're used to out of him. The hitting didn't really progress, but we've still got him locked up for, I mean, as long as we want him. And as long as he's doing good enough, I don't have any problems just holding on to a young switch hitting catcher who's going to turn in a 4.2 wins above replacement in a relatively down season. And then over to Gavin Sheets. Dude had a breakout year, plain and simple. Just had a breakout year. Is really going to make it tough to know what to do about Tristan Casas moving forward, because I don't see how you can not have Gavin Sheets play against righties. I mean, he's up to a 75 contact, 83 power against righties, and look at the numbers he put up. He almost batted 300, gave us 26 homers, and I think on a rate basis, on a per AB basis, he was our best power hitter. 26 homers, but only 383 at-bats. I don't know if it shows it on this screen. Oh, it does show at-bats per home run, but obviously we can't look at the leaderboard. But I think, because I looked pretty close to the end of the season, and his at-bats per home run was the best on the team. So by that number, he was our best home run hitter. He gave us a 4 wins above replacement even for being kind of a platoon player. I mean, he should only have been playing against right-handed pitching, but he's going to make it so tough to know what to do, because obviously you got to have Tristan Casas playing against righties also, but just based on the attributes, Casas isn't as good as Sheets. But I want Casas to be playing first, because I think that 70 fielding is going to help lessen the amount of errors that we get from our infielders. Like, he'll probably be able to make more scoops on bad throws. But if we don't have Sheets playing first, I don't know where we could put him. And then we have Matt Chapman, who who had another Matt Chapman year. I guess a little bit worse than last year, a little bit less power, but still 25 bombs, over 30 doubles, over 100 runs batted in. OPS was only a little bit lower than last season, but he kind of stepped up and played shortstop this year. So he made a few more errors, but it's shortstop, so it's a little bit more lenient. But yeah, I don't know what it is about him, especially with the lower contact. He's just one of my favorite players to hit with on this team. And then to round out the starting lineup, at least against righties, heading into the postseason, we have CJ Abrams, who started out in the minors, and then we got our call-up chance with him, got him a boost, and that boost is pretty much erased by now. I mean, I shouldn't say that, because he did get a lot to his vision and discipline also from the boost, but the contact went up to a 99, so it only went up +4 against righties. Against lefties, it went up, the full normal amount, but that's come all the way back down now to only +3 total. But that's why we have him playing against righties, because he can only hit righties. And he came back up on a tear, looking like he was back on season 1 form, but then he kind of cooled off from that. I feel like he hit all 7 of those home runs like right away, like within the first month, and then just didn't go deep again after that. Still put up pretty good numbers in the amount of time he was able to play after getting called back up, but just not quite back up to the levels he was playing at in season 1. But the biggest thing is we put him in center field, and he apparently has done pretty good. I know it's kind of tough to look at outfield defense when all the info you get is errors and fielding percentage, but just based on what I saw when I was able to use him in games, even with, well, now he has a bronze fielding badge out there, but even with that, the reaction and the speed ratings he have make him a pretty solid center fielder. I don't know if he's gonna really get to continue to show that off going into next season, with like James Wood probably being right on the verge of getting called up. So he's going to be someone we got to figure out a spot for, but that's going to be a lot of what we have to do going into next season, is just figuring out spots for our players. And Isan Diaz is right on that list also. Interesting season from him. He was another guy who got a call up with a boost, so there's where that +10 comes in for contact both ways. And he looks like he should be a really good hitter. Like, not just solid, but really good. And he just doesn't do that. Finishes the season under a 200 average. I know he didn't get to play much, but he started the season up. I sent him down, brought him back up, and neither stint he really did anything great. So I think if we're trying to find the odd man out in terms of the infield, it's probably Isan Diaz. He's probably who I want to try and trade. I don't know what his value is going to be with bad numbers, but good attributes, and he's relatively young. Might be able to get something for him. I don't know, but I think I'm pretty much ready to give up on him with already a crowded infield and players coming up through the system that I'm going to want on the team over him. And then we come to Ahmed Rosario, who is the epitome of having too many good players right now, because he finally turned in the season that I've been waiting for since we signed him. He did not have a good year last year. He didn't have a good start to this year, but he got that all turned around. He did still find a way into 115 games. He starts against lefties, but he must get brought in a lot against righties to still get 115 games played, or I guess he's just the first one off the bench if somebody needs a rest day. But yeah, 291 average, good on base, the slugging almost up to 500, a lot of doubles, solid amount of homers, 850 OPS, still struggles in the field, so the WAR isn't crazy high, but I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know. I want to have him in. I want him to start. I just don't see how he starts over anybody against righties. Then we got to move on to Lane Thomas, though, who after a really good season last year, had a really bad season this year, under a 200 average, 250 on base, 336 slugging, just bad. Just real bad all around. Almost a full negative win. Do you call it a win below replacement at that point? I don't know. But I even sent him down for a little bit. He got called back up in September, and now he's just staying here. I wanted to trade him. We never had a trade pop up, so he's just gone after this year. I'm going to let him walk. And part of me is almost glad that he kind of made that decision for me, because if he would have come back, had another season like this, or maybe even a little better as he's still improving in his attributes, I might have felt the need to at least think about bringing him back, but now I don't even need to worry about it. Same thing with Kevin Kiermaier, albeit to a lesser extent. I don't think I was ever really planning on bringing him back, but he did not have a good year as a hitter. I mean, when we signed him, we didn't expect him to have good hitting numbers. That's not why I brought him in, but the fielding and speed are also regressing. If he was just batting a little better, like I'm talking not even as good as last season, but maybe at least like a 210 average or something like that, I would be fine with what he gave me, but this was just awful. And the trend doesn't stop there, because this might be the worst of all. Jorge Alfaro as our backup catcher was so good last season. It looked like such a good long-term signing as a backup catcher option, and then he went out and did this. I guess actually he brought it back around a little bit by the end, but I remember way deep into the season he didn't even have a slugging percentage over 200. But yeah, that is I don't know what happened between him, Kiermaier, and Lane Thomas to all do so much worse than they did the season before, but these two are gone. Alfaro we're kind of stuck with. He's staying around as a backup catcher, so we just gotta hope he turns it back around and can hit again. But that's it then for our starting roster heading into the postseason. I don't think I managed to keep this short because we're still not done. I want to look at, first of all, the few players, if we can't even look at them, because the only way to see people in the minors right now is on the depth chart. But I want to see if we can see, I don't think we'll get to see Adam Simber numbers because he's not showing up here and he wouldn't be on the roster moving forward. And Matt Moore's not there either, and he's not on the roster going forward either. So I guess we don't even get to see those numbers. I know Matt Moore was disappointing in the bullpen. Last I saw of him, his ERA was up around 5.40, I think. Simber, though, on the other hand, had really good numbers, so I am disappointed he's not on our roster going into the playoffs. But now that we're here, I do want to look at any of the prospects we can look at from this screen. So the first one is going to be our #1 overall pick from season 1, Howard Ramirez. He's progressing amazingly, like up to a 76 after just 2 years since getting drafted, not even 20 years old yet. He's up in AAA. I can't see his stats, but he made it up to AAA. It's just still the same problems that I've been worried about him from the start. The clutch is still down in the gutters. He doesn't have great stamina, and he only has 3 pitches. I don't see him ever being more than a long relief pitcher. He could be a good long relief pitcher. He could punch out everybody. He's got the ratings for it. I don't think he's got the pitches for it, so it's going to be interesting to see how that translates. I don't look at this skill set and see dominant pitcher, even if he's rapidly improving. And then we can look at our other 76 overall, James Wood. Had some good progression this year. He's turned into a really good fielder, actually, out in center field. The hitting, I'd still like to see it come through or come around a bit more, but it's looking pretty solid right now. 54 contact versus lefties is the worst of the 4 main hitting attributes. Kind of a low clutch rating, though. Again, we can't see what he did in AAA, but he's up to a 76. He's still not on the 40-man roster. We can't do anything with him until he is, but I wouldn't be shocked if this is the season the game puts him on the 40-man. I'm just hoping we find a way to keep him in the minors to at least start next season and then still get the chance to fast track him. Because if we can fast track him and call him up, get him a huge boost to that contact, he turns into an even better player than he already is. Going 1 year forward now, we can look at Robert Hassel, who's up to a 73. He had pretty good progression too throughout the season. He's not quite as good as James Wood, and the one bad thing is from the start, I always kind of thought, oh, we can just kind of have him be our starting first baseman when he gets the call finally. But now that we have Tristan Casas, that kind of closes that door. So I don't really know what Hassel's going to do, especially with all of the different center field prospects that we have, but mainly James Wood. Another one here is Alonso Acevedo, a draft pick from just this last season. But dude's only 18 years old, up to a 77 overall, had this kind of progression at a C potential. I don't know how much better he's going to get without a fast track, but if I can get a fast track with him, this might be the biggest fast track opportunity we have in our entire system. Because if I can fast track him, not only get him a huge boost to his contact, but bump the potential up to a B, he instantly turns into maybe our best prospect in the entire system. I mean, he would already be a better backup catcher than Jorge Alfaro is right now, and that's without a fast track or anything. We can also see some more pitchers from here. Michael Hinojo kind of got stuck this year, but I also knew that would happen if we don't get any fast tracks for him, because he's also a C potential. I don't remember, it would have told me after that draft in season 1, but that was so long ago, so I don't remember what his actual potential was. If it tops out at 73, I'm not sure, but he's still somebody that it would be nice if we get a fast track with him and he gets up to a B potential. I could see him being at least okay. Then we have Jose Ayala, picked him in the same draft as Acevedo, so our second year draft. Really excited for this guy out of the pen. I mean, that hits and Ks per 9 rating where it's at, 90 K per 9 rating. Really good stamina for a reliever. I just kind of slightly worry about the walks, home runs per 9 in clutch. And then Estevan Zapata. This dude I think is gonna be better than Howard Ramirez. I could actually see him being a starting pitcher. Especially, I mean, this is like the perfect fast track because the hits and Ks per 9 are like his lowest attributes. The clutch, the stamina are fine. So if we do get a fast track, we'll see all those per 9s go up a nice little +6, +7. That could turn him into a really good prospect at only 19. I mean, he already is a really good prospect at only 19 as it is. Going one more year ahead, now we can see Leo Blanco, who I'm really excited for in the pen. He just kind of looks like he's going to be the new Joe Mantiply. I mean, these ratings are very similar, except I think the home runs per 9 isn't nearly as good as Mantiply is, and the Ks per 9 is better than Mantiply. But a 5-pitch mix, those numbers, only 18. I don't care about the C potential. Mantiply is a C potential, and he's been fine. We now can also see Brady House, who had some nice progression again, except the contact versus lefties going down 4 isn't good. But he's turning into a pretty good power bat against lefties. He got a +9 there. He's up to a 74. I think the timing is going to be just about perfect with only one more year of Matt Chapman. I think one more year in the minors and Brady House will be ready to go, especially if I got a fast track. We can also see Evan Carter, who I traded for this season. Didn't progress a ton, but he's got that 8 potential and he's at a 72. He's kind of just solid across the board. And then going forward here, one more year, we still can't see Elijah Green, but we can see a couple other pitchers now. This guy is also from the very first draft, Pedro Almanzar, and I kind of see him as Estevan Zapata, but a little bit behind. They're the same age, kind of similar pitches, and I don't know. I see it. I don't know if it makes sense to anybody else, but I could see him being good. It's just going to take a while to develop him. Miguel Valencia is pretty much in the same spot. Dude has innings eater written all over him. Just get those per 9s up a little bit more and he can just cruise through seasons pitching like 230 plus innings with a 4+ ERA. I'd take that. And then the final year we can go in our little depth chart screen here, and now we can finally see Elijah Green, who I feel like year after year looks like a slightly worse and worse prospect. I don't know what it is, but that's 2 seasons in a row now in the minors where he's gone negative in his progression against lefties. He's down now to only 37 contact against lefties. If that was coming up at the same rate that his attributes against righties were, he would look pretty good. But now I don't know. I mean, maybe with a fast track, gets him up to an A potential, that could kind of turn him around. He's also the youngest of all of our outfield options coming up through the system. But just like comparing him to the other guys now, he's the only B potential. His progression's kind of scaring me. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is going to be with him. But I think in terms of prospects, that's all that we can see here that's worth talking about. So that is where the stat recap is going to come to a close. And I just glanced over at my recording time and I'm over an hour, so I did not keep this under control at all. But next episode, we get to start the postseason. We get to go for a three-peat. Who would have thought that not only would we be going for a three-peat with this team, but a three-peat in our first 3 seasons? And we did it. Hang on, I didn't even make a big enough deal about this when I saw that we were ranked first, because that means it's official. We did it. Episode 1 was titled Worst to First, and even though we did go from the worst ranked team to the World Series winners, now being ranked first overall truly means that we went from worst to first in this March to October. So guys, make sure if you made it to the end of this episode, which I'm actually curious how many people do make it all the way to the end of a stat recap episode, but make sure you hit that like button for me if you enjoyed it. If you are somebody that makes it to the end of the stat recap and you're not subscribed to the channel, I don't know how you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, because it seems like you clearly enjoy my content. So go ahead, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. But thank you guys for watching today, and I will see you next time for the postseason.